Welcome, history seekers, to a journey through time. Today we explore a dark chapter of faith. What occurs when the promise of eternal salvation becomes the ultimate excuse for tragic ruin? In the 11th century, thousands departed their homes, marching far across the world to claim the Holy Land. They wore the Red Cross upon their heavy steel armor, trusting God would guide their righteous, holy weapons. But the road to Jerusalem was paved with deep sorrow, and heaven became a dark, tragic nightmare. At the dawn of 1095, all of Europe was trapped in the freezing shadow of the Middle Ages. Severe poverty and sickness ravaged the barren lands, while feudal lords divided the broken kingdoms. The common folk lived in constant fear and starvation, desperate for any glimmer of divine hope. The grand cathedral bells rang out with a mournful echo, signaling a shift for the Christian world. Urban II stood before the Council of Clermont, wrapped in magnificent crimson and gold robes. Ancient historical chronicles state he delivered a profound speech that ignited a massive fire. He spoke of the sacred Holy Land falling into darkness, urging knights to reclaim the tomb of Christ. He promised them absolute salvation from the heavens, erasing every terrible sin they committed. The crowd erupted in wild religious frenzy, shouting loud that this was the absolute will of God. Simple peasants quickly dropped their farming tools in the mud, consumed by a blind and desperate faith. Peter the Hermit walked barefoot through freezing villages, holding up a crude wooden cross to the sky. His manic preaching gathered a massive peasant army, promising them glorious wealth in the east. Meanwhile, proud European knights knelt within grand stone cathedrals, polishing heavy steel weapons. They sewed large red crosses on their pristine white surcoats, marking themselves as the holy warriors. Lord Godfrey of Bouillon rode out on his mighty warhorse, leading a massive column of gleaming steel. The air was filled with pride and pure spiritual devotion, masking the devastating storm to come. Tens of thousands marched confidently toward the unknown east, leaving their familiar world behind. They believed that God himself was walking right beside them, assuring a swift and glorious victory. Women and children followed the marching Crusader army, carrying small bundles of their belongings. The muddy roads echoed with their continuous chanting, a sound soon fading into desperate cries. They crossed immense rivers and dense forests for many months, driven entirely by pure, holy zeal. The pure vision of Jerusalem kept them moving, shining like a golden beacon in their tired minds. Yet historians note that they possessed no real supplies, truly unaware of the distance ahead. This vast migration was completely chaotic and wild, lacking genuine military discipline. Reaching the distant edges of the European borders, the reality of their long journey struck. The shining armor now gathered heavy desert dust, and the pure white cloaks started to tear apart. Food supplies ran out much faster than they calculated, forcing the Holy Army to scavenge for scraps. The peaceful pilgrimage transformed into a desperate march, where survival overtook their holy faith. The shadow of doom began to creep over the Crusaders, quietly waiting for them in the dry lands. They stepped into the harsh and unforgiving alien lands, truly unaware of the tragic ruin ahead. The gate to the east was now open before their very eyes, and the horrifying trial had begun. Entering the barren, rocky plains of Anatolia, unprepared peasants faced their first true nightmare.
It is the end times.
Agile Seljuk cavalry emerged from the desert dust, riding swift Arabian horses with great ease. Deadly arrows rained mercilessly upon the helpless crowds, piercing through their fragile clothing and skin. Thousands of simple pilgrims were vanquished without any mercy, their essence soaking into the desert sand. Surviving knights pushed forward into the burning Syrian sands, facing an enemy far worse than swords. The scorching midday sun turned their heavy iron chainmail into blazing ovens that slowly cooked them. Dehydration and severe hunger ruined their strong bodies, leaving behind only hollow, walking ghosts. Lord Godfrey struggled to keep his suffering men moving, his own face blistered and burned by the heat. They drank the dark, muddy water from shallow, drying puddles, spreading terrible sickness through the ranks. Beautiful war horses collapsed within the barren dunes, forcing proud knights to walk on foot like peasants. Historical records tell us they consumed their own horses to survive the devastating famine. The red crosses on their chests were no longer bright and pure, stained with thick desert dust and dark mud. During the siege of Antioch, their moral limits were pushed beyond normal human breaking points. If you were starving in a desert surrounded by your foes, would you abandon your sacred, holy vows? Endless suffering slowly chipped away their humanity, replacing their faith with a cold, bitter rage. They began to pillage and burn local settlements, justifying their harsh crimes in the name of God. Every step they took toward the Holy Land was measured by the horrific number of the fallen. Men who once prayed for peace now found extreme comfort in the deafening sound of clashing iron swords. The long journey completely mutated their righteous intentions into a terrifying inner darkness. They were no longer the proud nobles of Europe, but beasts driven by an intoxicating madness. The wind carried the constant screams of the fallen, echoing through the rocky valleys every night. Turkish defenders fought fiercely with their deadly artillery, treating Crusaders as a foreign plague. Even the strongest knights began to hallucinate from the heat, seeing angels commanding them to strike. Peter the Hermit led his ragged followers like a madman, consumed by his religious delusions. They blindly marched over the tragic remains of their brothers, ignoring the awful stench of decay. After 3 long years of unspeakable suffering, the dusty horizon revealed their destination. The giant stone walls of Jerusalem rose from the dry earth, standing like an impossible golden fort. Tears of joy washed the heavy dirt from their hollow cheeks as they fell to their knees in complete awe. But the city gates were firmly locked against them, guarded by soldiers ready to defend their own homes. Crusaders camped outside the massive, impenetrable walls, building wooden siege towers from local scrap. The final battle for the center of the world was about to start, promising an ocean of tragedy. On July 15th, 1099, the frantic attackers finally breached the sacred city walls. With wild, demonic roars, they flooded the ancient streets, vanquishing everyone in their tragic path. The promise of salvation vanished entirely, replaced by a terrifying storm of extreme ruin. Men, women, and innocent children were tragically struck down by the heavy, unforgiving broadswords. Muslim defenders fought bravely, but were overwhelmed by the fanatical European warriors. Jewish citizens seeking refuge in their synagogues met a devastating fate without hesitation. Even native Christians living in the city faced a tragic end during the absolute chaos. The stunning holy shrines became horrifying scenes of despair, stained with thick layers of tragedy. Chronicles state Crusaders waded through holy temples, with crimson stains reaching up to their ankles. Lord Godfrey swung his broken sword with a blank, traumatized stare, silently ending countless helpless lives. Terrifying screams of the fallen echoed off the stone walls, completely drowning out their daily prayers. Those who survived the dreadful journey successfully mutated into the very demons they once feared. They stripped fallen victims of their shining golden jewelry, satisfying a terrifying greed. The winding ancient streets of Jerusalem became deep rivers of unspeakable human suffering. Fire consumed the ancient wooden structures, turning the sky into a choking black nightmare. Fanatical warriors hunted down every single person hiding deep within the dark shadows. The magnificent Dome of the Rock was completely surrounded by a tide of ruthless warriors. Many helpless families begged for mercy, but the cold iron weapons answered with swift ruin. Even the bravest defenders were tragically struck down before raising their shattered shields. Historical accounts state the horrific tragedy lasted for an entire brutal afternoon. The sheer scale of the conflict completely erased the spiritual purpose of their journey. Beautiful, ancient tapestries were carelessly ripped apart and soaked in thick layers of dark mud. The victorious Crusaders walked over thousands of fallen bodies without showing any remorse. They believed they were purifying the ancient city, but only poisoned it with endless sorrow. The surviving knights stood quietly in the ruined temples, their breathing heavy and exhausted. The terrifying madness finally began to fade away, leaving a crushing, silent emptiness. They had successfully captured the holy center of the world, but completely lost their own souls. The heavy stench of decay rose into the burning sky, a terrible offering to their god. Lord Godfrey dropped his heavy stained sword onto the stone floor with a hollow metallic ring. He looked at his shaking hands, realizing holy water could never wash away this awful sin. The sun began to set over the conquered ancient city, casting long, dark shadows over the fallen. In the gloomy days that followed, the Kingdom of Jerusalem was established in the ruins. A fragile new Western outpost was forcefully planted right into the heart of the Middle East. The surviving holy warriors were now the undisputed rulers of a shattered, tragic wasteland. The Crusader leaders gathered inside the ancient holy church to finally claim their new thrones. They offered the grand title of king to Lord Godfrey, presenting a pristine crown of pure gold. But the exhausted commander refused to wear a crown of gold, where his savior wore sharp thorns. He chose to remain a humble defender, forever haunted by the cries of the fallen victims. The once proud knights who survived the desert now wandered aimlessly through the empty stone streets. Their shiny armor was permanently scarred, and their pure white cloaks were ruined beyond repair. The immense wealth they conquered could not heal the psychological wounds inflicted by the war. They sat alone on the ancient stone steps, staring blankly into the distance like broken stone statues. The passionate religious fire that drove them out from Europe was now completely extinguished. They had traded their humanity for a piece of rocky land, surrounded by many bitter foes. The massive piles of the fallen outside the walls were slowly consumed by flocks of black ravens. This brutal victory did not bring peace, but merely ignited a devastating chain reaction. The surrounding Muslim nations united in deep outrage, swearing revenge against the invaders. The lives lost in Jerusalem planted the dark seeds of a hatred that would last for centuries. Generations of brave warriors from both sides would continue to perish upon this sacred sand. The First Crusade fundamentally transformed the relationship between the East and the West. It demonstrated the terrifying power of true belief, manipulated by ambitious leaders. The cross became a symbol of extreme fear and destruction for people of the sacred Holy Land. Meanwhile, in Europe, the returning veterans were celebrated as legendary historic heroes. They brought back sacred relics and incredible tales, hiding the darker truths of the tragic war. But those who actually witnessed the tragedy knew that genuine paradise was never real. The heavy toll of the Holy War forever stained the moral authority of the mighty Church. As dark night covered the city of Jerusalem, the silent stone walls kept their tragic secrets. The spirits of the innocent victims whispered through the empty corridors of the holy temples. The Crusaders achieved their impossible goal, but lost the very virtues they had fought to protect. Their tragic pilgrimage serves as a haunting reminder of the dangerous fragility of man. The First Crusade left a legacy of endless tears. Was it a holy mission or a profound crime? Tell us your thoughts on this dark history in the comments. Can faith ever justify such extreme pain? If you enjoyed this journey, please hit the like button, share, and subscribe to our channel for more content.